taking it out on me. Oh, to hell with her. Why should I rack my brains about her? At long last the woman waved her flag, shouted something to the engineer, and let the train past the signals, out into the open. But as the 14th car sped by, she stuck her tongue out at the two men chatting on the floor, who had got on her nerves. Once again Samdviatov wondered. 5. When the outskirts of the burning town, the round oil tanks, telegraph poles, and advertisements had vanished in the distance, giving way to a landscape of woods and low hills with occasional glimpses of the winding road, Samdviatov said. Let's go back to our seats. I have to get off soon and your station is the one after the next. Be careful you don't miss it. I suppose you know all this area very well? Like my own backyard. Up to 100-mile radius. I'm a lawyer, you know. 20 years of practice. I'm always traveling about on business. Even now? Certainly. But what kind of business can there be, these days? Anything you please. Old unfinished deals, business operations, breaches of contract. I'm up to my ears in it. But haven't all such activities been abolished? Of course they have, nominally. But in practice people are asked to do all sorts of things, sometimes mutually exclusive. There's the nationalization of all enterprises, but the municipal Soviet needs fuel, and the Provincial Economic Council wants transportation. And everyone wants to live. This is a transitional period, when there is still a gap between theory and practice. At a time like this you need shrewd, resourceful people like myself. Blessed is the man who doesn't see too much. Also an occasional punch on the jaw doesn't come amiss, as my father used to say. Half the province depends on me for its livelihood. I'll be dropping in at Varikino about timber one of these days. Not just yet, though. You can't get there except by horse, and my horse is Lame. Otherwise you wouldn't catch me jolting along on this pile of scrap. Look at the way it crawls. Calls itself a train. I might be useful to you in Varikino. I know those Mikulitsins of yours inside out. Do you know why we are going there, what we want to do? More or less. I have an idea. Man's eternal longing to go back to the land. The dream of living by the sweat of your brow. What's wrong with it? You sound disapproving. It's naive and idyllic, but why not? Good luck to you. Only I don't believe in it. It's utopian. Arts and craftsy. How do you think Mikulitsin will receive us? He won't let you in, he'll drive you out with a broomstick, and he'll be quite right. He's in a fine pickle as it is. Idle factories, workers gone, no means of livelihood, no food, and then you turn up. If he murders you, I won't blame him. There you are. You are a Bolshevik, and yet you yourself don't deny that what's going on isn't life, it's madness, an absurd nightmare. Of course it is. But it's historically inevitable. It has to be gone through. Why is it inevitable? Are you a baby, or are you just pretending? Have you dropped from the moon? Gluttons and parasites sat on the backs of the starving workers and drove them to death, and you imagine things could stay like that? Not to mention all the other forms of outrage and tyranny. Don't you understand the rightness of the people's anger, of their desire for justice, for truth? Or do you think a radical change was possible through the Duma, by parliamentary methods, and that we can do without dictatorship? We are talking at cross purposes, and even if we argued for 100 years we'd never see eye to eye. I used to be very revolutionary, but now I think that nothing can be gained by brute force. People must be drawn to good by goodness. But let's drop the subject. To return to Mikulitsin, if that's what is in store for us, then why are we going? We should turn back. Nonsense. To begin with, Mikulitsin is not the only pebble on the beach. And second, Mikulitsin is kind to excess, almost criminally kind. He'll make a fuss and refuse and resist, and then he'll relent. He'll give you the shirt off his back and share his last crust of bread with you. And Sam Deviatov told Yuri E. Andreevich Mikulitsin's story. 6. Mikulitsin arrived here 25 years ago from Petersburg. He had been a student at the Technological Institute. He was deported and put under police supervision. He came here, got a job as manager at Kruger's, and married. There were 4 sisters here in those days, one more than in Chekhov's play. The Tuntsevas, Agrippina, Avdotya, Glafira, and Seraphima. All the young men were after them. Mikulitsin married the eldest. Before long they had a son. His fool of a father, who worshipped freedom, gave him the unusual name Librius. Librius Livka, for short, grew up a bit wild, but he had all sorts of unusual talents. When the war came he was 15. He faked the date on his birth certificate and made off to the front as a volunteer. His mother, a sickly woman, couldn't stand the shock. She took to her bed and didn't get up again. She died the year before last, just before the revolution. At the end of the war Librius came back as a lieutenant hero with 3 medals, and of course he was a thoroughly indoctrinated Bolshevik delegate from the front. Have you heard about the Forest Brotherhood? No, I'm afraid not. In that case there's no sense in telling you the story, half the point would be lost. And there isn't any point in your staring out of the window at the highway either. What's so remarkable about the highways these days? The partisans. And what are the partisans? They are the backbone of the Revolutionary Army in the Civil War. 2 things account for the power of this army. The political organization that has taken over the leadership of the revolution, and the common soldier who after the last war refused to obey the old authorities. The partisan army was born of the union of the 2. Most of them are middle peasants, but you find all sorts of people, poor peasants, unfrocked monks, sons of kulaks up in arms against their fathers. There are ideological anarchists, riffraff without identity papers, and high school boys expelled for precocious skirt chasing. And then there are German and Austrian prisoners of war lured by the promise of freedom and repatriation. Well, one of the units of this great people's army is called the Forest Brotherhood. And the Forest Brotherhood is commanded by Comrade Forrester, and Comrade Forrester is Livka, Librius Averkievich, the son of Averky Stepanovich Mikulitsin. You don't mean it? I do indeed. But to go on with my story. After his wife's death, Averky Stepanovich married again. His second wife, Elena Proklovna, went straight from school to the altar. Naive by nature, she also affects naivete. And although she is still quite young, she already pretends to be younger still, prattles, twitters, plays the ingenue, the little foolish girl, the pure field lily. The moment she sees you, she puts you through an exam. When was Suvorov born? Enumerate the conditions of equality of triangles. And if she can trip you, she's overjoyed. But you'll see for yourself in a few hours. The old man has his own peculiarities. He was going to be a sailor. He studied marine engineering. He's clean-shaven. Never takes his pipe out of his mouth, talks through his teeth in a slow, friendly voice, has the pipe smoker's jutting lower jaw, and cold grey eyes. Oh, and a detail I almost forgot, he's a social revolutionary and was elected regional deputy to the Constituent Assembly. That is surely very important. So father and son are at swords' points? Political enemies? In theory, of course they are. But in practice the forest doesn't make war against Verikino. However, to go on with the story. The 3 remaining Tuntsevas Mikulitsin's sisters-in-law by his first marriage live in Uriadin to this day, all confirmed spinsters, but times have changed and so have the girls. The oldest, Avdotya, is librarian at the public library. Dark, pretty, desperately shy, blushes scarlet at the slightest provocation. She has a terrible time at the library. It's as quiet as the tomb, and the poor girl has a chronic cold, gets sneezing fits and looks as if she'd like to drop through the floor. All nerves. The next one, Glafira Severinovna, is the family's blessing. Terrific drive, a wonderful worker, doesn't mind what she does. Livka, Comrade Forrester, is supposed to take after her. One day she's a seamstress or she's working in a stocking factory, then before you know where you are she's turned herself into a hairdresser. You saw the woman at the switch, who shook her fist at us. Bless me, I thought, if it isn't Glafira gone to work on the railway. But I don't think it was Glafira, she looked too old. And then there's the youngest, Simushka. She's their cross, she gives them no end of trouble. She's an educated girl, well-read, used to go in for poetry and philosophy. But since the revolution, what with all the general uplift, speeches, demonstrations, she's become a bit touched in the head, she's got religious mania. The sisters lock her up when they go to work, but she gets out of the window and off she goes down the street, collecting crowds, preaching the second coming and the end of the world. Well, it's time I stopped talking, we're nearly there. This is my station. Yours is next. You'd better get ready. After Samdeviatov had gone, Antonina Alexandrovna said. I don't know about you, but I feel he's a godsend. I think he'll play some good sort of part in our lives. Very possible, Tonyeka. But it worries me that everybody recognizes you as Kruger's granddaughter and that Kruger is so well remembered here. Even Strelnikov, the moment I said very kino, asked me sarcastically if we were Kruger's heirs. I am afraid that after leaving Moscow to escape notice, we are going to be even more conspicuous here. Not that there is anything to be done about it, and there certainly isn't any sense in crying over spilt milk. But we'd better stay in the background and keep quiet. Generally speaking, I'm not too happy about the whole thing. But we must be nearly there. Let's wake up the others and get ready. 7. Antonina Alexandrovna stood on the platform at the Torfiana station counting her family and her luggage over and over to make sure that nothing had been left on the train. The well-trodden sand of the platform was firm under her feet. But the anxiety lest they miss the station remained with her, and the clatter of the wheels was still in her ears although the train was standing motionless before her eyes. This prevented her from seeing, hearing, or thinking properly. Passengers who were continuing their journey were calling out goodbye and waving to her from the car, but she never noticed them. Nor did she notice that the train was leaving and realized that it had gone only when she found herself looking at the green fields and the blue sky across the empty track. The station was built of stone and had benches on either side of the entrance. The Zhivagos were the only travelers who had got out at Torfiana. They put their luggage down and sat on one of the benches. They were struck by the silence, emptiness, and tidiness of the station. It seemed strange not to be surrounded by a milling, cursing mob. History had not caught up with this remote provincial life. It had not yet relapsed into savagery, as at the capitals. The station nestled in a birch wood. When the train drew in, the cars were plunged into darkness.